vaccines have been effective for 200 years. It's a technology that's been around for 200 years. The technology started with pus being injected into a child. A scientist named Edward Jenner. I call him my favorite Jenner. His son, he injected his son with pus, and basically that was the first vaccine, if you will.
Okay.
And then it turns out that's the basis for the smallpox vaccine. And nowadays it's not pus being injected into people, it's mRNA inside of a lipid nanoparticle and giving near 100% protection from severe COVID-19, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
In a good year, just to put it in perspective, the flu vaccine gives you about 30 to 60% of protection against severe flu, and this vaccine is giving 90 to 100% protection against severe COVID-19. It's like hard to argue against it.
Yeah. So there's so many, and I would argue, right, and that there's people that also are educated that have a completely different belief than you do, right? And I'm just curious, people will claim that they've gotten Tourette syndrome because they got vaccinated as a kid, right? That's their true belief. And maybe that was the case, right? But does that mean that everybody should not get vaccinated as a result of that, right?
Well, the big one is autism.
Autism.
And anti-vaccine sentiment didn't start in 1998, which is when a now no longer physician published a paper saying that measles, mumps, rubella vaccine is linked to autism. But the damage was done. And there's so many studies that have shown the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine is not linked to autism. And there is no link from vaccines to autism. If people believe that, they believe that. And anti-vaccine sentiment started in the 1800s. But it's interesting that 200 years later, people are still fighting against a technology that's only gotten better and better.
Yeah.
But autism, just real quick with autism, we do have a lot of people who are still concerned for that when all these different concessions have been made. The MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine causes autism because of the preservatives in it. So then the preservatives were taken out. And then it was, you took out the preservatives because it was causing something.
Yeah.
And now it's not causing it. Well, it never was. By the way, that preservative was aluminum based, and there's more aluminum in breast milk than there is in one injection.
Interesting.
Yeah, much more aluminum in human breast milk than in a dose of the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. So unfortunately, people base their beliefs on their experience.
That's right.
And it's hard to take that objective approach, especially if something is statistical and the side effects are 1%, but you're the 1% that got it.
That's the thing.
Yeah, so that's the fear. People are always fearful of being that outlier. And
it's where you consume your media and where you're doing your research is where you start to put your beliefs behind, right?
And especially nowadays, you can you find yourself finding more of what you already believe. And we know, literally in Space Jam 2, the bad guy was an algorithm. That should tell you something. So, yeah. And also, I talked to a fellow physician who could not convince a patient to get a COVID-19 vaccine. And the excuse was, I watch Fox News.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so if we don't want to say that part specifically, it's my news source tells me not to. Basically. And how do you convince somebody? The answer is you don't. You just tell them this is what I recommend, and when you're ready to talk about it, I'm here.
So now what's your thoughts about other countries kind of almost like going to make it like the law where you have to it's not even a choice anymore?
Well,
right?
It's interesting. Again, we're halfway blessed here in the nation because we may be getting herd immunity for certain people, for certain populations, there's herd immunity through vaccination.
Yeah.
And then for others, it's through getting the illness repeatedly. And when it's all said and done, which one helped? The answer is both. Which one is more dangerous and reckless? It's getting inoculated by a virus instead of a vaccine. There's a great website, historyofvaccines.org, great timeline of vaccines. And if you look back, one of the first physicians who wrote a letter to a government stating, really, we should be pushing vaccinations, and it is reckless to allow people to just get sick with smallpox, was in the early 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
So physicians have a pro-vaccine bias. There's no way of getting around it. That's something a lot of anti-vax communities say. Oh, you're biased. You have an agenda. The truth is, the agenda is just to do what I do every day, which is vaccinate kids.
Mm-hmm.
Infant mortality, child mortality since 1800s. Just to put it in perspective.
Sure.
In the 1800s, out of 1,000 children, 46% of them did not make it to their 5th birthday. In 2020, 7 out of 1,000 did not make it to their 5th birthday.
Wow.
So
medicine has come a long way, right?
Yeah, and so when it comes to losing the objectivity in your own child, for example, with 103 fever, you may be fearful that your child is about to have a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that child may have had bacterial meningitis at age 2, at age 3. But nowadays, as a physician, I don't have to worry about bacterial meningitis in a fully vaccinated 3-year-old. So if there's 103 fever, 104 fever, for me, I'm just saying, what does a kid look like? Because sometimes we as adults with a 99, we're knocked out for a day. But kids with a 103 fever, they're just sitting there doing what they do. They feel warm. They're kind of cranky. But of course, sometimes kids do look pretty sick. Again, not downplaying anything. But the truth is, as a physician, I'm blessed. I can't imagine what it was like being a pediatrician 30 years ago when my dad was in his heyday, sending kids to the hospitals for lumbar punctures just to make sure they didn't have bacterial meningitis. Going back to needing antibiotics. Nowadays, we don't need antibiotics as much because of vaccinations.
Interesting. Huh.
Oh, yeah. Vaccines are the fact that we don't have to talk about diphtheria. There were times where diphtheria would wipe out kids in a town. A time where, and actually, when I moved to California in 2010, there was an outbreak of whooping cough. And the whooping cough to you and me is a hacking cough for 100 days, which is a long time. You lose your voice. You can cough so hard you break ribs. But for babies, they literally stop breathing.
Yeah, of course.
And so I can tell you, in my first 6 months of residency, so many kids were getting tested for whooping cough. I got bored of it. I was like, oh, another whooping cough test? This is probably going to be negative. This is probably... And that's where we are with the pandemic. We have a lot of physicians, a lot of people in general with just fatigue of the same thing. And a lot of it can be fixed with vaccinations. And nowadays, going back to 2010, there's a new recommendation. All new parents, all moms, all dads, all close contacts of infants should get a tetanus. I'm sorry, it's a tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis shot, but it's for the pertussis, so a Tdap vaccination. So how do we prevent certain things? It's prevention. Or how do we make sure certain things don't happen? It's prevention.
It is prevention.
And same thing with the pandemic. It's not we're waiting for a pill or we're waiting for an infusion. It's keep your hands clean. Don't touch your face.
Yeah.
Behavior change.
Sure.
It's always behavior change.